Wave if you can. Yes, okay. Thanks, Karen. Karen gave me a two-hander. Okay, this is the Waste Management Strategic Advisory Committee, and I'll call the meeting to order. And in the first thing we'll do is have the clerk outline the rules for the electronic participation for today's meeting.
Good afternoon. I'm going to briefly review the protocols for electronic participation in this Waste Management Strategic Advisory Committee meeting. We continue to comply with provincial orders and public health orders and recommendations to support social distancing, as well as prohibiting public gatherings of more than 10 people. This meeting is being streamed live from the Region of Peel website, and we encourage the public to listen to the proceedings online. The people present in the council chambers today are Councillor Starr, Councillor Innes, myself, and clerks and IT staff, sufficient to facilitate the technology and procedures of this meeting. We are conducting this meeting using WebEx. If you are phoning in, please note that you will be required to identify yourself so we can update the system with your name. Councillors will be familiar with using WebEx as it is the technology that has been used for the past few meetings of Regional Council. We would just remind you to take the following measures to avoid feedback and confusion with members speaking over one another. Please keep your microphones muted unless you have the floor to speak. Please use a headset and, if possible, avoid using hands-free devices or speakers. Please speak loudly and clearly when you have the floor. Please ensure that any surrounding environmental noise, such as televisions, radios, and pets, is eliminated. The recommended WebEx meeting display view is active speaker view, video view, or active speaker and thumbnail video view, so that you will have a full view of the presentation slides or other meeting materials. If you are experiencing a poor Wi-Fi connection, please disable your video. If you drop off the meeting, please rejoin. And if you have difficulties, committee members are asked to please contact your local IT department first for assistance, following the same process as you do for local council meetings. As required, your local IT department will reach out to regional IT staff for further assistance. The video function for WebEx is activated, so you may choose to turn on your video. You can choose to leave it on throughout the meeting, or you can turn on your video only when you are speaking. If you don't want to activate the video feed, you are not required to do so. We will still hear you through the audio feed. During a presentation, we recommend that you close your participation list so you have a full view of the presentation slides. During staff presentations, the slides will be visible on your screens. If you have difficulty viewing the slides, they were all provided to you in the committee agenda that was distributed on Thursday, June 11th. If you wish to speak, please click on the round participant icon at the bottom of your screen to enable your participant list. To indicate your request to speak, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon located to the right of your name in the participant list. Your hand icon will turn blue when engaged. Members who connect to the meeting via the phone-in option can send an email to council@peelregion.ca and you will be added to the speakers list. When called upon, please unmute your microphone and proceed. When you have concluded your comment or question, please mute your microphone and lower your hand by pressing the then blue hand to the right of your name in the participant list. If you have any motions or amendments to introduce during business on today's agenda, please email your motion to council@peelregion.ca, identifying yourself as the mover. Please note that a seconder is not required at committee meetings. Each motion will be read in its entirety prior to calling a vote. Recorded votes are not allowed at committees. For committee votes, the chair or the clerk will call for any objections. If you have an objection, please unmute your microphone and indicate your name and objection. If no objections are stated, the motion will be deemed to be approved. When the meeting moves into closed session, those members who are participating remotely must ensure that no other person is in the location from which you are taking part in the meeting, or make appropriate arrangements so that any or other persons cannot see or hear any of the confidential deliberations taking place. If this is not possible, the member must withdraw from the meeting until it has moved back into public session. Prior to moving into closed session, members shall declare that they adhere to the confidentiality standards as outlined in the Regional Council Code of Conduct. Members who leave the meeting during the in-camera session and attempt to connect back via the phone or dial-in option will be required to send an email to council@plregion.ca indicating their request to rejoin the meeting. We will temporarily pause the in-camera session and unlock the room to allow you to join. You will be required to identify yourself upon joining the meeting. If you have questions as we proceed through the meeting, please send them to council@plregion.ca together with a request to speak. We shall now commence the meeting with the roll call. To ensure that we maintain quorum, please send an email to council@plregion.ca to indicate that you are leaving the meeting and provide an email when you return. We will monitor the email and we will also monitor the WebEx participant list. I will now be calling the roll call. Please indicate your presence by responding here when called upon. Chair Anika? Chair Anika? Okay. Councillor Dillon?
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Fortini?
Here.
Councillor Groves?
Here.
Councillor Innes? Here. She's here, present in the chamber. Councillor Kovac?
I'm here. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Councillor Mahoney?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Paleshi?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Rass?
Here.
Councillor Sinclair?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Starr is present in the chamber. I will now pass the meeting back to our committee chair, Councillor Starr. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First on the item, are there any declarations of conflicts of interest? Seeing or hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. And I think, Norm, based on our discussion, there will be an adjustment on the agenda schedule. Norm, do you want to speak to that?
Certainly. Actually, I think Patrick wanted to give us a little bit of advice, but based on today's agenda items, I believe there's a reason to go in camera to discuss some.
Okay. Patrick, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I am here. Can you hear me?
Is that you, Patrick?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, I take it we aren't in camera at this stage?
We're not in camera right now. We're just going through the agenda and the reasons for adjusting the agenda to go into camera first.
Yeah, I think there is a combination of legal advice and advice regarding instructions that merit going in camera, as Norm has suggested, and that would be a good first order of business in relation to some of the public agenda. So the public agenda should follow.
So then we'll have a motion basically to adjust the agenda to have the in-camera item first, to go into camera, and we'll have a motion to go into camera first. Councillor Mahoney? All those in favor? Carried. Back?
Yes. We'll go into public session now. Just give us a few minutes for staff.
Okay, we'll
to
take a 5-minute
change
bio
the
break for
setting.
everybody out there in audience land and come back in 5 minutes. That's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Are we ready to go? Okay, staff tell me we're ready to go, so we're back in session, and I will have the clerk read the preamble here.
So we have just moved out of in-camera. There's now a requirement to vote on the in-camera direction, and I will read it as follows. That the direction given in camera to the Commissioner of Public Works and Director of Waste Management as set out in the oral update on the waste management programs, position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality be approved and voted upon in accordance with Section 239(6)B of the Municipal Act as amended. Are there any objections to the motion?
Okay.
So hearing none, the motion passes.
Okay. Thank you.
The
Oh.
second, the
Go ahead.
second item is the in-camera communication item, and that will be referred to staff. Is there any other objection to that referral to staff? Hearing none, the motion passes. So I pass it on to Councillor Starr.
Okay, so we're back to the normal agenda now. The number 4, there are no delegations. So we're into reports, and hopefully we're at 5-1.
Yes.
Okay. This is the transition of the Blue Box program to a full producer responsibility. I think we asked for this report previously. And Norm, I think you're going to take us through this.
There, am I unmuted now? Am I on?
Yes.
Yep, you can start.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry about that. I never know if I'm supposed to unmute or if the clerk does. Good afternoon, everybody. This presentation includes an update on the Blue Box transition process and summarizes the analysis that staff did to determine a preferred transition date for Peel Region. In short, it summarizes the Blue Box transition report on today's agenda. Next slide, please. You will recall that the Minister of the Environment set out a multi-step process to transition the Blue Box program from municipal to producer control. This graphic shows the main steps. We are still in the first box, which includes consultation with key stakeholders from municipalities, producers, and service providers. The ministry is using this step to develop core policy positions that will feed into the draft regulation. Moving from left to right, the province will post a draft regulation this summer for public comment. That's when we will see how they actually incorporated all of our feedback into the wording of the regulation, and of course, we will comment on the draft regulation. The final regulation is expected in early 2021. Once the regulation is finalized, producers will have just under 2 years to organize themselves and plan the transition before they have to begin transitioning municipalities. The transition itself will occur over a 3-year period from January 2023 to December 2025, with roughly a third of the municipal Blue Box programs transitioning in each year. As indicated in the report, AMO has asked municipalities to let them know our preferred transition date, and that's part of this, this presentation and this report. And then at the end of that 3-year period, producers will have full control of the Blue Box program. They will pay for it, they will be accountable for the results, and they will decide how it's run, subject, of course, to any limits written into the regulation. The next few slides will focus on the first box. Next slide, please. This slide shows the discussion topics that the ministry had with the stakeholder working groups. PO staff worked closely with AMO and other municipal representatives to ensure we spoke with a strong, consistent voice. Having a seat at the table allowed us the opportunity to influence the core policy positions that will be reflected in the regulation. While I'm confident that our concerns were heard, the ministry still needs to balance the interest of the various stakeholders. The next two meetings on June 25th and July 6th will give us our first indication of how the ministry intends to achieve that balance. Those two meetings will be used by the ministry to let the stakeholder group know where it has landed on core policy components of the regulation. Staff will participate in those meetings and will continue to provide feedback using all available channels. Next slide, please. This slide lists some of the preliminary policy proposals from the ministry. At the beginning of each meeting, the ministry would present a preliminary policy proposal and ask for feedback. Some proposals generated more discussion than others. Before I go through these, I want to say the ministry was quite clear that they are preliminary and that they will be adjusted to reflect stakeholder feedback. The final proposals and final policies may therefore look very different from what you see here. Some of these, anyway, the ministry, it's proposing to designate a wide variety of packaging and products. So I'll start at the top and work down. In short, if it's a package, it's designated, and I think that's good. What's not quite as good is that recovery targets will be set for broad categories of material and not for individual materials. And that will make it difficult to determine if individual materials are having a problem with diversion rates. It's good that producers will be required to collect from all residential sources, including retirement homes and long-term care homes. What's not so good is they're not going to be required, at least not in the preliminary proposal, to collect from parks, public spaces, and schools. This backsliding was identified as a major concern by all municipalities and even by some producers. As you know, PO and our local municipalities currently collect from these sources. Staff have engaged with staff at local municipalities and school boards to discuss this so that they're aware of it. It's good that producers will have to provide free collection services and receptacles so that residents don't incur any cost. The final item that we found a little bit troubling on the municipal side is that while there's going to be specific requirements for promotion and education during the 3-year transition period, there won't be any afterwards. The ministry expects that producers will just have to do this to be able to meet their targets. So for each of these, staff provided feedback consistent with PO's adopted policy positions. Next slide, please. Moving on to our preferred transition date. As indicated in the report, AMO asked for council resolutions with preferred transition date within the 3-year window to help support the ministry's development of a transition schedule. AMO also wanted to know the rationale why we were doing it. The ministry has confirmed that they will use municipal preferred transition dates as one of the factors they consider in developing a transition schedule. The expectation is that they will have a schedule for each of the 3 years with municipalities listed in one of the 3 years. Staff considered multiple dates and narrowed the list down to 3 logical dates: January 1st, 23, October 1st, 24, and October 1st, 25. Staff developed a model to assess the financial implications of transitioning on these dates and other dates too. The model was used to assess 2 different scenarios. One is where we are hired by producers to provide blue box collection services on their behalf, and one where we are not. The model allowed us to factor in the amount that we were paid for our services by producers, and also if we had to pay breakage costs for early termination of any of our collection contracts. Next slide, please.
Staff evaluated the three potential dates using the three criteria endorsed by committee at its last meeting: financial, control over operations and customer service, and integration with other waste operations. Staff considered the feedback from committee at our last meeting that while financial implications are important, customer service is important too. Next slide, please. So January 1st, 2023, this is the earliest possible transition date, and it's the date that provides the greatest potential savings for Peel, and also the greatest risks. Municipalities who transition first will be trailblazers. There'll be nobody else for us to watch, nobody else to learn from. We will be doing it ourselves. I'm confident that if Peel is hired by producers, we would do a good job and others could learn for us. But there's no guarantee we would be hired by producers. This is one of the biggest unknowns and therefore one of the biggest risks at this time. We've asked the ministry for more certainty, but they are reluctant to tell producers how to procure collection services. If Peel is hired by producers, we could utilize our current collection contractors to provide the service and would likely see savings in the upper end of the range shown. If we're not hired by them, and there's no guarantee that we would be, we would likely see savings in the lower end of the range. And we would also have to amend or terminate our collection contracts 21 months early and potentially incur costs for doing so and other disruption. And of course, if we're not providing service, we would not have control over the service. We wouldn't have control over the level of quality or customer service. And this is a key consideration if Peel is one of the first to transition. Next slide, please. The second date we considered is October 1st, 2024, to coincide with the end of our current collection and processing contracts. Once transitioned, Peel would realize approximately $15 million per year in net savings. That's $150 million over the next 10 years. This is the simplest, safest, and least disruptive time for Peel to transition. It would not require amendments or termination of any of our major contracts. It would ensure that Peel has control over the quality and level of service for at least the first 2 years of the transition process, which is when all parties will be learning the new system. Next slide, please. The third date we consider, October 1st, 2025, is the latest practical transition date. It involves extending all of our contracts by 1 year, which we can do. This extends the time Peel has control over the collections, but it comes at a cost of foregoing an estimated $15 million in savings compared to option number 2. Next slide, please. Before I get to our preferred transition date, I want to reiterate what we see as the key risks and unknowns that influence our recommendation. The first major unknown is that we haven't seen the wording of the draft or the final regulation. In fact, we won't know to the end of this month where the ministry landed on core policy components of the regulation. What we do know is that it is highly unlikely that the regulation will require producers to hire municipalities to collect blue box material, which brings me to the second big risk. And I apologize because I got these out of order on the slide. It's actually the third one on your slide. But the second major risk, in my opinion, is whether producers will hire Peel to provide collection services or not. This, in my opinion, is the biggest unknown and the biggest risk that Peel faces in choosing a preferred transition date. The third unknown, listed in the middle of the slide, is what service level changes producers will expect. Even if they hire Peel, they may ask for service changes that we disagree with, and that might affect the amount of potential savings. The preferred transition date recommended on the next slide is based on what we know to date and our assessment of these 3 risks. If any of this changes in the draft or final regulation, or during subsequent negotiations with producers, we would obviously let you know. Next slide, please. Staff recommends selecting October 1st, 2024 as Peel's preferred transition date. We believe it provides the best balance between the three councillor-endorsed evaluation criteria. It also represents the simplest and least disruptive time for Peel to transition. It coincides with the end of our current collection contracts and avoids the financial and operational implications of early contract termination. It provides 21 months for the region to learn from already transitioned municipalities before making changes in Peel. Next slide, please. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments from the committee? Okay. Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, Chair Starr. I guess one of the questions that we had talked about was about the region supporting the regulation of the designated schools and parks and public spaces as eligible sources. And I'm guessing that you probably need a recommendation from council to support that. Norm?
Yeah, I think that would be useful, so that during the stakeholder consultation process, that was the one item that made me the most nervous. I mean, there's lots of big items we talked about, but I know that our residents care dearly about having access to blue boxes. And if they lose access to blue box in parks and public spaces, if there's no certainty that they're going to be there, I think that'll concern residents. And, from discussions with council, I think it would concern you too. We can continue on with just my voice at the table, telling the ministry that that's an important consideration for Peel, but I think it might be stronger for this one item if there was a resolution from committee and council just endorsing that we do care about that we think they should be designated as eligible sources in the regulation.
Well, I know we've spoken many times around this table about education being a key component, and if we're not recycling and encouraging recycling in our schools as well as our public spaces, I think that only over time will create a more significant problem and challenge in reaching our diversion rate. So I'm happy to move a motion that the Region of Peel strongly supports that the regulation designates schools, parks, and public spaces as eligible sources in line with the Special Advisor David Lindsay's recommendations to the provincial government. And further, that a copy of this resolution be provided to the Town of Caledon, the City of Mississauga, the City of Brampton, Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board, and Peel District School Board, and the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Parks. And further, that the local municipalities be requested to support the designation of parks and public spaces as eligible sources.
As an additional motion?
Yes.
Okay. I think we have that. Okay, Councillor Sinclair, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm trying to think through. So private industry is going to run their own blue box trucks around Peel and pick up blue box, yes?
They do. We have an integrated collection system. One of our we have two curbside contractors. One of them has dedicated trucks for each stream. They have a truck collects garbage, a truck collects green bin, and a truck collects blue box. The other contractor uses some split body trucks where they go around and the truck will collect blue box and green bin in the same truck. But yeah, we have contractors who go around and collect it right now.
Okay, so when private industry takes over blue box, right, whole recycling, they'll set the schedules for picking up, and I think I've got split trucks here, so I guess Peel's going to, any new contracts are going to be garbage and organics, right, only. I'm just wondering who who the public phones to get service when there's a problem with Blue Box. Right now, they just call us. Any thoughts on how that's going to work on the street?
Well, not 100% certain on how it will work because producers haven't said how they're planning to do it yet, but there's a couple of things that could happen. The first is they could hire municipalities to do the collection for them. They could pay us to do the collection, and then we would include the Blue Box collection as part of our next contract, which would really look a lot like our current contract. If that happens, then we have a lot of control over customer service levels. We have control over time off the road for trucks so they're not collecting late at night. We have control to say that if your collection day is on a Tuesday, then your Blue Box collection is also on a Tuesday. So those are the advantages of them hiring us, or advantages to us. And I think the report says we're definitely interested in providing that service to them if we can reach acceptable terms. The other possibility is that they put it out to tender themselves, and maybe we bid on it, maybe we don't. But in either case, we might not win. Somebody else could offer a lower price, and they would collect the Blue Box. And in that case, we would. We'd want to have some discussion with them. I think they understand the importance of if Tuesday's your collection day, the Blue Box should be collected the same day. I don't think they're going to be looking to kind of get residents angry with them right off the bat, but it's possible that we would have garbage, yard waste, and green bin collected on Tuesday, and then the Blue Box truck would be on a Wednesday. That's a possibility. So there's a lot of risks if we're not hired to do it, and this is one of the reasons why staff is recommending that we transition in the second year, not the first, so that we can understand some of these risks. It gives us a little bit more time to talk to producers to negotiate collection contracts where we're providing the service and have some level of control over it. Now, that sounds kind of scary, but what I will say is the one large municipality that we can look to for experience, the City of Vancouver in British Columbia, they transitioned their program years ago, and initially the city collected the Blue Box material for them, but after a number of years decided to get out of that business and let the producers collect it for themselves. They had they worked very well together to develop a communication program and to make sure if a call came into a counselor that it would be transferred over to the people on the producer side. And once they said the transition went fairly well, probably as well as any contract startup did in Vancouver. And my counterpart in the City of Vancouver has said on a number of occasions that the collection by the producers is as good as the collection the city used to provide. They hire reputable contractors and they do a good job. So, it's possible that the producers could hire somebody else and do a good job. It's also possible they could hire somebody else and do a bad job. Who residents would call? I'm pretty sure the first person they're going to call is their councillor or the mayor. That's usually who they call first about garbage and these sorts of things. So if we're not the ones providing the collection service, we will have worked with the producers to set up a whole protocol of how to transfer those calls to producers and how to have them respond.
Okay, then, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Russ.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Norm, for the presentation. A lot to take in there because so much can change. It's almost like we're on the bleeding edge, not the leading edge. I think the thing, one of the things that we have to do is always keep the residents first and foremost in mind and making sure there is as a seamless transition as possible. I guess my concern would be the communications around that, and if the municipality was not the successful contractor, how that would roll out. And you kind of touched on the Vancouver experience, which doesn't sound awful. With your discussions with the province, is there any rights of first refusal on any contract to ensure that it's we can meet a one of the other private sector bids, if at all possible, only in order to keep that seamless service delivery going?
There is not, and I don't think there will be. We have asked for that. In fact, I asked for that because of the same concerns we're talking about right now. And the answer from the ministry is they want this to be an outcome-based regulation as much as possible. They tell producers they have to collect the material. They tell them what the diversion targets have to be, and as little else as possible. They don't want to tell them how to do their job. They don't want to tell them how to negotiate and hire contractors. So that was the response I got. My sense is that's what will be in the draft regulation. I would certainly comment again that I think they should do something like you suggested, but I'm not hopeful. The comment that I've heard the most from the ministry in the past 6 or 8 weeks when we were doing this is they have to balance everybody's interests. And every time we ask for something, they say that that's good feedback, but remember, we have to balance everybody's interests. So some of the things we ask for, we'll get. Some of the things we ask for, we won't get. But we'll keep pressure. The transition is, for all municipalities, it's a big concern how the transition happens to make sure it is seamless. So us, other municipalities, AMO, we're all saying the same thing. We're providing quite a bit of feedback, both written and verbal, to the ministry on this. So I think they're hearing that concern for sure.
Now, a quick question on the back end. So if say the regional appeal isn't successful in collecting the blue box materials and the private sector will have those contractors come and pick up the materials, what are the checks and balances that those materials are in fact going in the correct waste streams?
Well, the first thing is they have to hit a certain capture target or diversion target. So I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but let's say for certain types of plastic, they have to achieve a 50% diversion rate. And certain types of metals, it might be 70 or 80%. So that gets measured throughout the year. And if they miss that target, there will be penalties. We don't know what those penalties are just yet. They'll be written into the regulation, but there will be penalties for missing those targets. Now, to measure that, there's going to be, and we do this right now with the current program, there are waste audits almost every day, right? Like everybody's measuring inbound material, outbound material. We measure, I think, 4 times a year how much recycling ends up in our garbage. So we'll certainly know what the numbers are in Peel because we'll be measuring some of these things, and others will too. So I think that part of it will get measured fairly well. So I'm not as concerned about that.
Okay. When do we expect the province to come out with the regulations?
They have committed to post a draft regulation this summer, and they suggested maybe later summer. Okay. And they've committed to post the final regulation in early 2021.
Do they have to go up on the environmental registry for posting as well?
It does. The posting this summer will be on the environmental registry. It'll be for public comment.
Okay. Now, did the province not make changes recently to the posting requirements for the environmental registry? Can we check into that? Because I heard that they suspended some of the postings due to COVID. I don't know if they're going to reinstate them.
I will have to look into that because I hadn't heard that, but I will certainly look into it.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Look forward to next steps.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further comments, we have a I'm going to split it up here. We have a motion for 5-1, and it's is that easy to do it that way? So the transition to the Blue Box program to full producer responsibility, presentation be received, moved by Councillor Grass. Okay, all in favor? Seeing no hands going the other way. And then we have a motion read the whole motion?
It was part of the agenda package, so it can be
Yeah,
taken as read.
You probably saw it in your agenda package for October 1st. It starts off October 1st, 24 be the Region Appeals provisionally preferred date. I'll have a short reading if you've read it all. No problems?
Move short reading, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All in favor? Carried. And moved by Councillor Mahoney, or I saw his hand there. Okay, we had a short reading. All in favor? Carried. And we also have on an additional by Councillor Innes, and I think she read it, but were you all paying attention? It's basically that we support the regulation designating the schools, parks, and public spaces, and that we send this to all the other bodies, and that the local municipalities be requested to support the designation of parks and public spaces as eligible sources. How's that for a short reading? Okay, moved by Councillor Innes. All in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Okay. Now, one short one coming up, because I know a couple of councillors have to be out of here by 3 o'clock. That's what I was told before. So 5-2. Norm? Okay, thank you, Norm. Somebody want to move that? Go ahead.
Sure. Why don't we just go to the next slide? I just want to give an update on some of the programs in waste management due to COVID, some of the things we've been working on. And as you see, the first bullet is the biggest one. It's work that's either suspended, slowed, or deferred due to COVID. Curbside multi-residential building enforcement pilot, we had to pull the people who were working on that, we had to pull them off to work on some other initiatives during COVID. Community Recycling Center optimization study, we've put on hold until the end of COVID, and we may even have to go back and revisit based on some of the things we learned during the COVID to change that optimization study a little bit. The townhouse conversion study, we had to pull people off of that to work on other things. Organics waste collection pilot in BIAs, probably not the right time right now to be starting a pilot collection for that in BIAs, so that's on hold. And the long-term financial plan, we're still doing work on the modeling and preparing a long-term financial plan for the division. But the public consultation components have to wait, so that's going to be probably backed up by a couple of months from where we were. And I don't think any of those, I don't think any of them are overly urgent, and I don't think we really have a choice on whether we slow them down or defer them, just because the people had to work on other projects. Two things that are kind of moving along at the regular pace. The Lakeview Development Vacuum Waste System continues to move along. The schedule is set largely by the developer and the documents that they submit there. And the Blue Box transition, as we just talked about, the ministry is setting the schedule on that one, and they've decided to continue pushing forward through COVID. Next slide, please. Two big projects that I just want to give an update. Anaerobic digestion. You'll recall that we're in the process of procuring an anaerobic digestion facility to manage our green bin material. So that's active and it's moving forward as quickly as it can. We expect it to close later this year, and there will be an award in early 2021, and it'll be operational in 2024. Mixed waste is also part of our long-term strategy, and it focuses more on processing multi-residential garbage, but also curbside garbage. It's really scheduled for development after 2025, but staff has had meetings with the ministry and a vendor where they raise pilot opportunities that can help resolve some of the risks that we see with mixed waste processing. And this is one where staff, we see value in conducting a pilot. Of course, we'd have to look into it a little bit more to understand just how we would structure such a pilot. But that's one because we're aware that there's an opportunity now, we wanted to make committee aware of it and just to seek your direction from the committee on whether you want us to investigate further and report back on our findings and our recommendations. And just to be clear, these two projects on this page, they can proceed in parallel. We can do anaerobic digestion for green bin, and we can do a pilot for mixed waste on our multi-res garbage. So I don't see any conflicts with that. So we're just hoping for direction on what to do with the green bin pilot. Next slide, please. That's all I have, so I welcome questions.
Okay, Councillor Innes has some.
Thank you, and I'm going to be quick because I know people have to jump off. So I'm not going to ask for details, but at some point in a future meeting, it would be great to have an update a more in-depth update about the Lakeview development and the vacuum waste system, because it is new technology and something different that we're looking to employ here. So if we could look and ask staff to do that at a future meeting, that would be great. In regards to the anaerobic digestion, so you're saying that the COVID hasn't really slowed down that process. You're just sort of giving us a status update. Is that correct, Norm?
It hasn't slowed it a lot. It might, maybe overall by a month, just because it takes a little bit longer to do everything now, both from us and from the proponents. But no, it hasn't had a real big impact on it.
Okay, thank you. So I look forward to that moving forward. And in regards to your comments with the mixed waste, I do have a recommendation that I would bring forward for consideration from the committee, that staff be directed to report back to a future waste management subcommittee meeting with further information related to a mixed waste pilot for multi-residential garbage. And the report would include information on how a pilot fits into Peel's long-term waste management strategy, including timing, scope, cost, risks associated, outcomes, and the options for procurement. I think that we really do have to look at a multi-pronged solution in dealing with waste into the future. So I'm glad that Norm had mentioned that this would be a parallel system. I sort of liking it to the fact that the Region of Peel, while it's responsible for policing, employs two different police forces to deal with policing because our communities are different and the waste streams themselves are different. So I think that this pilot project would be beneficial and would ask that recommendation come forward to direct staff to do some further investigation and bring back more information for consideration for this council.
Okay. Do you want it as a resolution or a direction?
It'll be in the form of a motion.
Motion?
Yeah.
Okay. So I move that.
Okay. You move that, and obviously it was well read. All in favor? Seeing none, carried. And then we'll have the presentation receipt by Norm, moved by Councillor Kovac. All those in favor? Carried. On to number 6. There are no communications of the communications that we usually get in that file. Other business by any member of the committee? Seeing none, we've done the in-camera communications. I guess for the, we have to receive the letter from URIC? Or is that was that part and parcel of the?
Yeah, it
That was part,
discussed.
okay, that was part of it. Okay, so we don't have to do that. And the next meeting is Thursday, September 3rd. And as usual, if that gives you real heartburn to all the committee members, let us know because we can change the date. Okay, move for adjournment, Councillor Sinclair. All those in favor? Carried. Good meeting, lots of information. So lots of new information to digest. So thanks very much to everybody. Have a great day.